a few months until I am instructed to let's go on that quarterly schedule. Second, and this is in regards to the PUC settlement. Part of this for budgetary reasons, but we can amend the budget. There was some clarifications required about what you are financing and what you are not with your bonds. So you had paid for these projects with the increased water and sewer rates with the potable water system. And so it may have looked like on the surface when you look at these new budgets and new estimates that this project is done. But it was always intended that that would be reimbursed to the operating funds of the district out of bond funds. So the district has the right to pay out of operating now and reimburse itself out of bond funds. And that is a way, if it expects to sell bonds, a very reasonable way to level the debt, level the expense. You do not want to ever be in a spot to where you have highs and lows from year to year. It will affect your credit rating. It'll get you in trouble with the state, all sorts of trouble. That is why these financing options are in place. So if you choose to advance on a project like you did with the potable water system, even though it came from water and sewer, you were expecting to reimburse yourselves out of bond funds. It's about a $300,000 project, less than that. I would entertain that you recommend looking at that and getting a financial advisor opinion on how that, any tweaks between your rates that could be done to accommodate that, or if not, I don't do the financial advisor equations, but I'm familiar with them and I can recommend ways to, suggest ways to adjust those things. And same with the engineering fees. He needs an instruction about whether or not to attempt this. So the goal is, and the restriction is, still in my mind, not changing the overall tax rate. I don't think the individual taxpayer cares what their split is between maintenance and debt service. Your bond payments and running the system, short-term, long-term payments, so long as it is managed appropriately and the total rate is consistent going forward. I don't mean to speak for anybody, but this is about goals of the overall tax rate is here. You might have some flexibility with a penny or two to shift over to your debt service. You do have some reserve that you've eaten into, but if you're selling bonds, that makes up your reserve. You might have a penny or two that gives you may give you a couple $100,000 over 20 years. Things like this need to be looked at by your financial advisor. And I will request that if you are interested in looking at that. You have the authority voted to issue more than $2.4 million in bonds. You will be paying out of pocket on all of your $10 credit reimbursement until such time as you finance that potable water project. So for these reasons, I recommend you at least look at what the options are on this.
Yeah, I think we need to reevaluate this because I have under a completely different impression, especially from our first meeting when we did have a discussion.
You thought we could cut it, yeah.
With regards to all this, I thought certain things were already paid for. So
Yeah.
I think we definitely need to look into
And
this.
on the budget books, it's impossible to tell coming into it which funds were allocated to which projects, because it does go to a general operating fund. So that is just getting into,
Tours I don't like so much because it's hard to track.
yeah. But there are multiple different funds that do track these
Because
things,
it gets
and you
confusing then,
can
yeah.
track any individual project you see fit.
Well, then what's most important right now? Are we supposed to?
You are not going to approve any bond application report today anyway.
Okay.
So I think that does not change the existing work that has gone into that
Yeah.
report.
Well, no,
It
of course.
doesn't change a whole lot of me continuing to get it done.
Yeah, so
It's just
what,
a
all he,
line item on one page that all it adds up to the total.
Bill needs to know whether to add one more project to it. And that decision needs to come from the board on how does that affect the financials? Do we keep the same total tax rate and that we eat into the reserve in the long term?
That's,
It's these kinds of decisions, but I have no idea. I have no idea if it's even feasible at the current tax rate.
And, there's multiple ways of breaking that down. You can do the, construction cost of that non-pot only, or you can do construction and engineering on a project. So you can break it down to basically, 20%, 80%. If that makes your dollar amounts equitable, your desire.
So to give you an idea, what I plan to ask the financial advisor to do is to look at the current split of the tax rate and look at the budget and see if, how many cents he thinks he could transfer over from M&O to debt service without affecting or only slightly reducing the operating reserve over time. And whatever he comes back, if he says 0 cents, then we do 2.4. If he says 3 cents, then that equates to, X amount large. That kind of equation. And then if he says, well, we can also dig into the reserves deeper, all of these are a decision for you. I think we really like a high reserve here with hurricane danger.
that would be my
This-
preference.
Yeah, of course it would be.
Yes.
And also, we know that we can hold this in the reserves for another 2 to 3 years and sell another set of bonds down the road where we reimburse this to ourselves, even though it was done now. So it's just about being prudent in a 5 to 10 year plan. You don't need to approve anything on that front. I have a conversation I would also like to have with you about procedural issues with this board, which I would like to discuss in executive session.
Which we have planned for this one. Okay.
That's it for my report.
So after all of that, Michael, are we asking Bill to add the non-pot system to?
Sorry,
the-
thank you for asking. I am requesting an instruction from the board for me to for me to work with the financial advisor on an amount,
to be
a
added?
potential amount doable to be presented to you guys.
Okay.
So you can present it to Bill, or instruct Bill to either add this or don't add this.
Is there a time frame?
I could have the numbers next week, but I think I probably will just coordinate with you guys. If it's a non-starter, we don't need to have a special meeting. If there's something to consider that Terrell recommends, well, you could do this or that, and this would add, you could add 200,000 or, whatever the number is, then maybe we call a special meeting before the next one to instruct Bill to add it in so that at the earliest time possible, we can be submitting the actual bond report.
All right. That's,
I would move that we have a special meeting regarding that and our budget.
Well, let me run to ground first whether it's even necessary.
Okay.
so,
If your financial, and to clarify, if your financial advisor comes back and says they don't have, I don't recommend they change this 1 inch,
Okay.
then we'll see you next month. If he comes back and goes, actually, they have 3 different ways that they could supplement this and the tax rate's the same, well, then I recommend you have a special meeting to discuss it.
All right, so then, at this point, we should wait until you hear back. All right.
okay,
I just need an instruction whether you want me to do that or not.
okay. So do I have a motion from the board to accept the attorney's report, which includes him
Giving him instruction.
talking to the financial person to come back to the board on how we should.
I'll second that.
Okay, Bob so moves and John seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, passes. All right. All right, we have public comment. Open for any kind of comment. On the background?
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi, good evening. My name is Stephanie Bird. I live on Marlin. I'm here on behalf of a group of Bayou Vista residents who are interested in pursuing curbside recycling. We're approaching the Mud Board because your entity holds the contract with our solid waste provider. We have two objectives this evening. One is just to start the dialogue about this possibility. We realize there are many questions that need to be answered before any, any action can be taken. For example, can the current contract be amended, or would we need to wait until the execution of a new contract? What are the different options and costs associated with this type of service? Our other objective is to respectfully ask a member of the board to volunteer to act as a liaison with our group as we seek the answers to these questions. Thank you.
Okay. Could you give that to Sharon to be in the minutes?
Oh, she'll get it. She'll get
Okay,
it.
all right. All right.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Ken Davis, 1036 Redfish. Two items. One, I would suggest you consider that cleaning out culverts and pipes might be maintenance instead of dredging. They've been there a long time, they've been filling up over a long time, and nobody's really done much to do that. That'd be number one. Number two would be, I strongly suggest that you include paying yourselves back for the non-potable, since you're already giving the money that was supposed to pay for that back to the people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Lou Wortham, I live on Redfish. When you take a look at the billing system, we've had that one for a long time. It looks pretty antiquated to me. Now might be the time, rather than solving one problem, to invest some money for the future, because we may have more variables to deal with in the future. Or maybe not. You know, you guys are gonna have to look at it. I trust you'll do a good job with it. My next item is a question. There's a final dredge report. Did I get that right? When, has the board approved it?
There's
I haven't
nothing to
seen it
approve.
on any of the minutes. You just-
Nothing to approve.
There's nothing to approve.
It was just a presentation that was.
It's just they requested a survey and they received one.
Right.
Okay.
They should have
Is
a
it-
presentation here.
We
Is
accepted
it
it.
publicly available?
Yes,
Sure.
Yeah, it
it's
should
this
be.
report here. It's been publicly available.
Well, the draft was available. Nobody knew about the final.
Well, this is the one that they presented to the whole board.
Yeah, it's the only one we have, it's just that,
When they
it's
presented with
That
all
was a
the.
draft.
the only
This
only
is-
one that I'm
this is
aware
final.
of.
It has the minutes and
It's
has
the
the.
only one
okay.
I'm aware of,
has
Lou. I don't
everything
know of any
you
other
think of.
one.
It's all there.
I came by and requested a copy, and I got the draft with no information.
It may say draft on it, but that's, as
There
far
was-
as I know, nothing
There was nothing
ever
updated. They
Yeah.
just took draft off and, yeah, there was no amendments from the
submitted a
draft to the
draft
final.
and nobody had any comments,
It's
I guess.
complete. If you didn't, we can get some.
So how did we get any information, if it's the same as the draft, how did we get any new information about the culverts? And the various other things that they didn't know about when they presented the draft?
Good question. I contacted them myself and talked to the engineer based on their stuff. They went back to records and said that the final draft that they put in there included the culverts. The dollars amounts included the culvert, that they had all the dredging reports, they had the soundings, they had all the reports, and the final dollar amount for the dredging included the culverts. And I have that on email, and I filed that with Mud 12. So that's what it is. Since there was no other issue, we just have a report. And they said that as a report, that's final, and that includes the dollar that's in this final report, includes the culverts,
There's just
including the culverts.
no physical mention of it in the report.
Correct.
Okay, so you called in and
I
said,
got amended from an email and it attached to a report in the office.
okay.
Is there a general category it might fall under, that it just may not say that, but it's a general category of charges? If that makes sense. I don't
Yeah,
want to put
makes
words
sense.
in your mouth,
But
but it's
rather than-
describing these waterways in this area and everything related to it.
Yep, that's what I said.
For this
That's what it
price.
was, yeah.
And he can,
I said, I don't wanna go through the expense.
Is able to
Making a
confirm.
new one, cost expense, more money for us. No, just tell me that it includes cleaning out and survey the culverts, because you did the surveys, we saw you. And you wrote back and said, yes, we apologize, it's done.
They didn't survey the culverts, they didn't know about them.
They did in the area, we saw them,
They did,
yes,
they did know about them.
yep. And we saw them, because my neighbor was the one who brought it to their attention. He said, I saw you, I brought you down there to cover it. He said, oh, yes, we have all the data. And I-
They just didn't remember it when they presented the report,
That's
when I
exactly
asked
right.
them.
The reporter.
that's
didn't-
not exactly right. They just didn't choose to mention it specifically in their overall grand scheme of project scope and description. They did not mention 2 pipes that they are also gonna clear.
Okay,
I think they're talking
I'm
about the
gonna leave-
culverts in
Or,
Omega.
not not
Yeah.
the pipes, but the Omega Bay culverts,
and well, no, I wasn't talking about anything.
or whatever the heck.
Oh.
They didn't know about the Omega Bay culverts either.
They said they were unaware of them at that
Yeah.
Yeah, they were unaware of Bio Vista
The,
culverts.
the.
Are you talking about the Omega Bay culverts or the
Which-
pipes that came up in the discussion from
No,
earlier
no.
in today's meeting?
There's culverts in Omega Bay, pipes. There's also culverts in Bow Vista.
I think the best thing to do here on that one,
Those are
because
the
that
things
was
we
a,
can-
yeah, I'm sorry, I just cut you off. I apologize.
I apologize if I've cut anybody else off.
We should watch the video of that very first meeting, because, I'm trying to remember everything that was said. A lot of it was talked about, it's on, it's on.
I'll also comment,
Yep.
say
That's probably the
that
best thing you can
nobody
do.
is approving any expenditure of funds on any project of that type at all today.
Yeah.
And if any future discussion involves it, it ain't gonna be based on today's discussion.
I was
I'm
just,
pretty sure it was discussed, but honestly, I can't remember everything, I don't remember all of it.
there was
Questions came from the
supposed to be
audience.
changes
About it.
made to the final report. My recollection was that there would be changes made to the final report, apparently just an email, because you settled it for that, with regard to the culverts in Omega Bay, the pipes in Bio Vista, and maybe one other thing that they were unaware of. Again, we would have to look at the,
Right.
or listen to the
Yeah.
tape.
Exactly, yeah.
But I've now figured out that there exists a final report. It is highly the same as the draft, except for the email that says financially,
Covers
the
it.
culverts are covered in this price. And is there any other addition
Nope.
to the report that's identical to the draft that I came by and picked up?
I will show you the final copy and you can determine if there's difference. I don't think there's difference.
Yeah, okay, you don't think there's any differences? Okay. What Mike, and real quickly, one last thing.
I
What
apologize
Michael,
for that. I apologize if I didn't understand what you were asking there.
it's okay, we're all up to speed now. What Michael suggested on the minutes procedure, I think is exactly appropriate. It's just, it gets too unwieldy otherwise. Amend them when you have to. But those are this board's minutes, and to the extent that you don't get them right, you can be held accountable. And to the extent that you don't get them right, you can make changes. And that's a reasonable procedure, it seems to me.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
If there are no other public comments, I think, okay, sorry. We do want to come back to the garbage service question before we,
Yes.
that needs to be addressed. The garbage service question, we can't forget about that. She's waited patiently all night.
You wanna tell her before then?
Yeah, honestly, probably.
Go ahead.
Or maybe we'll just cut you short so we can talk to her.
Tell me the answer, I may change mine.
I know you're going to. It doesn't matter. We'll answer 20 times.
Go ahead, John.
I think,
Yeah.
well, based on that public comment, I think you should look into this and find out the contract issues. Just have Sharon look it up. Don't spend my time on it.
No, right, yeah.
And then contact them and ask for a proposal for recycling services if the board would like to hear a proposal. Won't cost you much at all in office fees. And also along these lines, public comments used to be at the top of the meeting. And for this exact reason, and maybe we label it public comments not addressed by an agenda item, because this very
It changes
kind
the
person
dynamics of
waited
the
the
meeting
whole
entirely.
time to make that comment, and I generally try to get the public comments in first at these meetings so that people have somewhere else to be and they wait patiently. But if they want to attend the whole meeting, they can. So for something like this, maybe we should change that up and put public comments back to the top.
Is there a reason?
So long as it was moved because we couldn't get to consultant reports because it was sort of soaking up all the public comments of the meeting, and so it was moved back a year and a half ago. So if we haven't covered it,
Oh, that's why.
now are there any public comments? So maybe we say public comments not having to do with an agenda item. Would you agree with that?
I would make a comment on that.
Yes, sir.
Only that the city has public comments twice. The
Beginning
first
and
one
end.
at the
Yeah, I was gonna
beginning
suggest
And the
that.
beginning is for
That's-
agenda
that's fine, too.
items only.
Yeah, they're two different types,
Specifically
right?
only for agenda items in the first meeting.
Okay, is that how they do it?
Then get all covered at the end.
We will,
One more
okay.
And they also.
I would do it as
They do
non-agenda
not have to
items
give an answer
first.
at that time.
During the discussion of the items,
I
public can
read
comment.
that, because they're just.
At the end is the catch-all, any other
So the
business.
board hears it, and then.
The other thing we don't have at the city is a lot of public commentary during the course of your discussions.
Do you prefer it one way or the other?
I prefer it the other way, where at the beginning, you get to put your comments in, so your opinion of what the agenda item should be gets on the table. At the end, you get to say anything you want to about any subject, and in the middle, you don't really say anything.
Right.
So-
I'll tell you this, right?
Right.
Yeah, I'll tell you a procedural problem. If it's not on the posted agenda, at least for us, and I won't speak for the city, but any act, no formal action can be taken on a item that there are ways around it. You can ratify it at the next meeting and things like that, but there are so many items in this district that are being discussed for the sake of structure. As we go through this, it's up to the board whether to consider public comments as you go or beginning and end. But I would recommend for structural purposes that you take people who are here for other items first. You open the floor as you have been doing, and this board has been doing for the last year on each individual item, so it's not people trying to collect their thoughts and talk about 7 items at the end of the meeting. And then at the end of the meeting, if anything has sparked a thought from a member of the public or some other item, then maybe that might be proposed. If it's an emergency action, you could take an action, or you can then put it on the agenda for the next meeting. And that is how I would structure your 1, 2, 3 of public involvement. But again, this is just
Good advice.
my advice, and you don't have to take it.
I'll look at the agenda. I only follow the agenda from the previous boards. So let me look at the other cities, come back and we'll modify something to, and again, work in progress, we'll find something works for everybody. Okay? You got,
The answer was that you will check into it with the trash hauler.
Not me. I recommended they don't pay me to do
I
that.
know, the board will cause that to be done. Okay.
Yes, and I don't know what other answer there could be for it at this point, unless somebody already knows our contract.
I guess I'm mystified how you could, buried in the budget could be a 5% tax increase, virtually in the same breath as saying that there is no tax increase. Somebody is confused. The numbers don't add up. And that with that 5% tax increase, you're applying it to 9.2% less asset base than your financial forecast indicated for the year 2018. So where'd the 10% of the asset base go? Why is that a real number? And if we don't know if it's real, why should we pay any attention to it at all?
Question?
So it would be very helpful if at some point the numbers could add up and be the same from 1 month to the next.
Totally agree. That's why we have been, that's why half the board, no, that's why probably all the employees are mad at the board, because we've asked so many questions. So, totally agree. We are in an attempt to make the numbers add up.
It's
5%
100%
increase.
legitimate.
Yep.
That's a legitimate criticism of the budget.
Totally agree.
Yep.
And I, we kind of talked about it earlier.
And we chose
I
to-
strongly recommend we review and amend this budget, but I also strongly recommend we got to get one in place.
Yes,
You
right.
will be in violation of state law if you don't have your next meeting. I always recommend we put one in place 2 meetings out. Because God forbid, there's not a quorum at the next
You
meeting.
can satisfy the state law by saying that you think that should be your tax revenue without declaring what the tax.
Correct.
revenue is.
We have not set the tax rate at all. This is an estimate that will be set later in the year. So when that tax rate is set, for anybody whose fiscal year ends, generally late summer, early fall, before you set your tax rate, lots of districts adopt their budget. Then once they actually set their tax rate, if it's materially different, then they will adopt an amended budget. Sometimes the bookkeeper tries to peg it or just uses the rollback rate so they can adopt a budget right now. But I'm in complete agreement with you that this should not be the final budget for the year.
For numbers consistency, during the bond elections, all, the 3 of them, the recovering the potable water as part of the bond issue was always the plan, published as the plan, though the amount kept changing, it'd go up and down all the time. But the definition of quote, potable water project, unquote, was always going to be funded. And now it seems that it's the stepchild that got left out, or somehow it's viewed as a change. The only change is having moved it. So at some point, it's gotta make sense there.
Understand?
Thank you.
Whether it's money in the potable water project or in the bond, it's still the same amount of money. It just depends on what pocket you put it in. Totally understand.
Richard White, 1295 Blue Heron. I'd already decided I wasn't gonna comment tonight, but I have a third option on this public comments.
Yes, sir.
At the beginning of the meeting, after the quorum, and the pledge of allegiance and prayer, I would say you'd have public comments, agenda items only, and other people that want to bring up something like what we had tonight, they would be on the agenda. There was one on the agenda tonight of that. In other words, you wouldn't come up here and talk about things, just anything. Like you were saying, you don't have to stay here 4 hours to talk about something that they want to talk about one thing and then leave. So let that be on the agenda. They want to talk, they get on the agenda and time to talk. So you've got the public comments at the beginning on the agenda items only from the public. The others are on the agenda. And then at the end, you can have public comments again on anything. Thank you.
We can consider
I appreciate your
the
comment.
options.
No, go ahead, sir. I appreciate your comment. We are, the board is trying to find the common ground so that you can comment. I mean, I've been to the Mark City Council where you say nothing except listen. We don't want that. But we don't want to be here in Bracado here because we're gonna talk for the next 3 days.
And that's a reasonable proposal.
Right.
But I would also comment that, ma'am, I'm sorry I forget your name. But you seem like a very prudent and responsible person that came in here with a proposal, and yet she is not on the agenda. And she only took up 30 seconds of the board's time. And it was something, yeah, and that if she had been on the top of the meeting in an open, non-agenda item, public comment, then that would have been an appropriate time to save her whole evening. And then any agenda item should be discussed during that agenda item or after.
Or she could have asked to be on the agenda.
But that's what I'm saying. She seems very prudent
She
and
is.
prepared and aware, and yet she is not on the agenda. So unless you are saying that everybody should know better, and, oh, you're not on the agenda, I'll see you next month, then maybe I'm trying to accommodate people who do walk in who may not be fully aware of the procedures, and not make them sit here for 3 hours. And I know you like him.
The other thing is, during agenda items, y'all talk, and we listen. We don't talk. And it's more efficient that way. But it also gets kind of not so good, but it's a hell of a lot more efficient.
Thank you. That's how the city runs their meetings.
Last one.
There's no
Oh, no,
discussions.
One more.
Yeah.
Who are them again? Just because it came up, if you limit public comment at the top to non-agenda items, no one can come up and say anything about what you're going to do before you've done it.
Now it's just an idea, but not what I proposed whatsoever.
Okay?
I mean, like, literally the opposite of the words that came out of my mouth, Lou. So for a public comment line item at the top, that's nothing that's on the agenda, then anything that's on the agenda should, I think we're not, this is a limited purpose district. You should discuss open, hey, we've got this contract up on an agenda item. Any public comments before we approve it? That's when you discuss it.
Oh, on the agenda item.
Public comments are always available you don't need to list public comments on an agenda item. That is how the board chooses to conduct their business. They
Right.
discuss engineering reports, any questions about the engineering report, and then that public can comment on anything, as we do every month. And at the end, then anything else that somebody has thought of along the way could also be brought up at the end as public comments or other business or something that needs to be put on the next month's agenda.
Okay.
But I had never said remotely that if you put public comments up here, then you can't have public comments during the meeting. I did not say that at all.
That's not, okay. Perhaps I need to restate what I said.
No, you don't. We're okay.
We'll get it figured out. We'll get it figured out.
Now, Warren's the, Warren's the newest, customer of the Bud. He just moved in last week.
I'm
So
not
he's,
either prudent or organized today as Stephanie is, but I want to say hello to everybody. I'm a new resident in Omega.
All right.
And as a proud,
Welcome,
hopefully
sir.
proud homeowner, I'd like someone on the board to visit with me about the unusual amount of garbage that I'm pulling out of the canal behind my home. Dozens of plastic bottles, jugs, beer cans, food, construction materials, and it's my canal alone, so I hate to say hello and have an issue, but I'd like for somebody to help me address that concern.
Would that be your HOA
Thank you.
on that one? I honestly don't know.
Where are you? What
That's
street?
Omega Bay.
he's in Omega Bay.
Yeah.
On Omega.
North Omega.
Omega North, just North Omega.
Construction debris,
of the issues with the pipes not
Yeah.
construction debris would be the city, Lamar.
Yeah, that's odd.
It's just a constant collection of whatever yard, cutting.
What he's commenting on is that because we live in an area that normally has a south wind blowing north, all of the grass cuttings and the trash blows north in Omega Bay, and where the culverts are, or the pipes are full, they just collect.
Just to be clear, I'm
We all
not
supposed
speaking
to-
of lawn clippings and palm fronds at all.
Right.
I'm talking about large pieces of
Well, I
construction
understand.
materials and debris that you would not expect to be thrown in water.
Okay.
I was over there, Omega Bay today, you guys are pretty trashy, there's a lot of trash, and I was surprised.
Is there that much? Oh, I don't know, but where's it coming from?
Is there any new construction going on?
I don't know, maybe somebody's doing some work, I don't
One of the
know.
things I'd like to address the board is you're talking about the minutes and
I can't hear. We can't hear.
can't make it do any more. So when, I think it's very important that when you have the topics, that yes, you have the citizens be able to talk. Because a lot of folks in here that are very smart, and I think it helps you board make your decision. I like the idea where you all talk in the beginning, not the citizens, because then we get the ideas of what you want to go do. And then you let the citizens talk and we get to give you some input saying, hey, before you vote, here's some other options or some other ideas or some other research that we've done. The beginning of it and all that, I think it's very fair what Mike was talking about. So, but there's a lot of smart people in this community. We just got to utilize it, and it's an important part to it.
Totally understand. And
I
it's,
don't mean, I do not mean any disrespect of Omega Bay. I'm sorry, but I'm just saying, communities, it's,
understand.
you know,
Appreciate it.
God, I've been in your place more than I have over an hour now.
As I used to say in my company owned, when we had sales meetings, I said, it's kind of like herding cats.
Hey, you know what, I see a lot more smiles than we ever used to see out here, so. you
Okay,
know, I think
we're running up
it's
to
getting better.
time effort because we have an executive board we have to have.
Yeah.
So if you got one question, Carol, one question,
Just a
quick
quick
one.
comment. You approved the minutes from the regular meeting on July 16th and the special call meeting on August the 6th. You left out the special call meeting from August the 10th.
We did-
There was no meeting held, there wasn't a quorum.
Okay, that was never clarified?
No, we even posted, I asked to post, so by virtue of law, if there is no quorum, there is no meeting.
Right.
So without any, and no notice is required, it's just by default, if there are not 3 board members, then there's no meeting. We saw in advance, yeah, even if you post an agenda and the day of,
Right.
there's not a quorum, people don't make it.
Right.
Just by matter of law, no meeting occurred, even though it was posted.
Right.
Posting is just a notice.
Yes.
So, that time we tried, and I talked to Sharon and tried to get out like, hey, we saw it coming a day in advance that there would not be a quorum, and we posted a cancellation notice, which is not required by law at all, but we wanted everybody to know that it should have been put up
They would
somewhere.
have been on the website, it was at the,
It
here.
was on the website and in here, yeah.
Last spot.
That just, no quorum would, due to lack of quorum,
Right,
no meeting will be
no
held.
meeting held.
So there was no meeting on the 10th.
Okay. I had a conversation with Cheryl Johnson from the Social Appraisal District, and September 30th is when they want everything in on tax rates, just so the board's got that in the back of their mind, that's what Galveston County requires, because they post things and they send those out early. So you do know what you're going to have, and on the back of their tax statements, they break down the last 5 years, so you can see exactly the things that have gone. And the, Cheryl Johnson has a report that you can get, pick up the phone and ask for, showing the county tax rates and we're broken down by entities, which is real helpful in budgeting things for this area. And I do also want to say, as Harry mentioned first, that potable water project, we were told before that thing began that that would come out of future bond money. As soon as we got the bond, that would be, so when you're doing the bond application, that should have been the first item that came up, because that's the one thing that we all knew was going to be there. And now it's sort of a afterthought, which seems
if you would allow me to comment one thing on that, Carol, it is still on the list of approved projects which will be financed under the authorization in the election. But since the project was already paid for out of operating, and we only had 2.4 million right now, and what we could issue out of that 4.5 this moment, there is a strategic decision. The potable's getting done. The district is financing it down the road or now, but other projects can now be done now. So if we replaced the potable project, which is already going, just for a budgetary line item, and then canceled another necessary project.
Yeah, we don't want to do that.
Now, all the three big projects are getting done, and the potable water system is going on the books, and it will be financed, and it will be spread out eventually with the bond funds. But it is not. It's being done. So you're characterizing it like it's not being done, but it is. It's done.
No, I'm characterizing it as it's being delayed, and we are showing
It's not being
that
delayed.
we are
It's-
running with this deficit.
it's the first thing
because
done.
you're refunding us from the mediation agreement, the $10 a month, that we're going to be 14,000 short a month. If you would have simply thrown that one in, you'd have had the money back in the general revenue, one lump sum payment to all the ratepayers that were involved, and we would have been done with it. We're dragging this out over an extended period of time for 21 months, really, for no good reason. That was the end.
Is there any restriction
Okay.
that it has to be 2.4 million? I mean, can those monies be put in this funding?
So I alluded to it before when we were talking about it, and the board authorized me to talk with the financial advisor for that explicit purpose. But what the financial advisor did 3 months ago is run a zero tax change to the debt service rate, and the current values, and no anticipated growth, no nothing. So it's a very, very conservative estimate, but it is, you want it to be conservative on growth and at the current debt service rate. So you make, what that tells them is you make X amount of money per year from taxes on your debt service rate, which means you can pay for this amount of mortgage. It's the same as your income to your mortgage, is the same as your debt service tax rate to your bond capacity. It's the same math. And so that's what he ran, and he came up with 2.4. And people and everybody questioned about it, but it was a conservative. Now, that's what we've been working on. But if we want, there is some flexibility there if you want to up your debt service rate and reduce your M&O rate, so you slowly, eat into reduce your reserves level, but over time, until you can, and the financial advisor can map this over 20, 30 years, as you know, to where you might be slowly eating your reserves, but it catches back up in 5 to 7. So things like this. And so I'm going to ask him to analyze just exactly what we can fit in, so long as the total tax rate is the same.
So that's basically what you did. So what you're saying is the tax rate would be the same.
My priority for any district is making sure that selling bonds does not raise the total tax rate. That is always my recommendation to any board, that you never raise the taxes to sell debt.
Right, because you just retired some debt. So I thought you were gonna leave it at debt service.
No, we just made a debt service payment, but we got,
We have another year.
we
Another year.
we have some future ones, we can layer it in here.
We've said that every meeting.
Yeah. We're not to
That's what
zero
I'm
yet.
saying. Now that you've paid off the debt, the money that was going.
Well, that was already part of the financial advisor's
Okay, but
consideration.
Lydia made it seem to me, and maybe I misunderstood, that the money that was, the amount that was going to the debt service, that tax rate would now be replaced by what was going to the new bond.
What she said and what that means is, in the year in which you retire old debt they will layer in the payments for the new debt.
Right.
So if I am leasing a car, and this isn't a good example because it's a lease, you don't own it, and you're gonna own all this stuff, but I'm making my car payment. The day I pay it off, I could either pay 0 in a car payment, or I could buy a new car and pay the exact same amount, but,
Right, I
but
understand
keep
the
making the car.
concept.
That's all she's saying.
Right.
It is not a this or that. It is a way to layer it in. And if you didn't have any, if you had debt service 12 years out, you could sell bonds today and your financial advisor would layer it in heavy 12 years out.
Okay, but my question is, she said that the rate would stay the same on the debt service because now we have a new bond. I understand that concept. What I'm
That's not a
struggling with-
correct statement.
What I'm struggling with is, what, are you gonna reduce the debt service rate?
Oh. Well, no, I'm not saying what you said is incorrect, but if that is what you said, that's not correct. If you don't issue any new bonds, your debt service rate will have to go to 0.
Right, but you have, and you're going to get the bond funding.
No, we have not issued any bonds. What was approved was a bond authorization election. No bonds have been issued whatsoever. There is no new debt. Until such time as this board has a meeting that issues a notice of sale and then has a follow-up meeting that has the award and approval of a bond sale. No bonds have been issued. The public has just authorized the ability to do that.
Absolutely, but what is this bond funding we're talking about? 2.4 million.
Right.
Isn't that the sale of the bonds and the bond funding?
Yeah, that's what he's prepping for. That will be the amount of when it is sold.
Wrong application. That's right. So I guess what I'm asking, was that to replace the bond debt that we had before, that percentage? Was that the objective? To keep it at 2.4 million, to keep that tax rate the same?
Yes. Thank you for, I apologize. We're both saying the same thing in different ways. Yes. So I came at it from the other end. We calculated the 2.4 using the current bond tax rate. And you're saying, is the bond tax rate the reason for the 2 point? So it's,
Going at it
yes.
from two different directions,
Yes.
but we're getting there. So you're saying that if you did ask for the non-pot water project monies to be put in there, then the tax rate may have to go up. to
Just the
accommodate
debt
that.
service, and then you reduce your maintenance and operations, and then you just run a slight deficit on your operating until it catches up. And
Right, and then you would have those monies in your operating fund.
no, you would reduce your. I would love, yeah.
Yeah,
You-
okay.
You're getting there. We're maybe saying the same thing again. These are not
You're paying
one-to-ones.
yourself back with
You have multiple, yeah, but that's different than what I'm saying. You have the option, every district has a reserve. You can choose the percentage of reserve that you are comfortable with. You may plan to run a deficit or be willing to reduce the amount of your reserve down from 97 and 98 down to 70% before in 7 years the reserve starts building back up again. It's just long-term financial planning. And it's
So, but
just
that
about
money
what
could
is the
not-
right way to do it.
it. But the money couldn't be used to go back into the reserve, which is what y'all were
No,
worried about.
no, the potable can, but then you're paying debt service.
Okay.
And then your use of funds is what's restricted. So your debt service tax rate can only be used to pay bonds. General operating can be used for anything, emergency funds. You cannot use debt service tax in an emergency. You want to keep that low. But you might be willing to trade off a penny or two of your, of your operations tax to supplement so you can pay for this. Let Terrell tell you.
That's why we have, exactly, those consultants to let us know all that stuff.
But, I mean, I work in this all the time too. We're the Securities Council and they're the Securities
The
Advisor.
reason that we chose the 2.4 million was so that we could keep the tax rates the same.
Exactly,
Right.
not change the rate, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I do remember that conversation.
It's the first blush equation. And then if that works for you, you don't have to ask any more questions. And if you need more funds, then you can start to work on your budget and finances and stuff like that. That's how I like to start with.
And we were talking about budget.
Well, actually, no, we're going into
All right, guys, sorry.
Okay,
executive
um,
session.
we
Yeah.
need to move on. We've got an executive session with the board. So we appreciate y'all coming. If you'll, we're gonna go ahead and form up just the board, executive sessions and matters.